We were supposed to get a fiber internet installation today. That was scheduled for today at 1 p.m. and I called them up. Nobody showed up. They said your installation is on Monday. Okay, so we'll wait till Monday. When we do have it here, that means we're going to be able to upload these videos much faster, pretty much immediately. And of course, we'll be able to start doing some live programs. Haven't done that in years. Anyway, let's check out what's happening. We have a major weather system out there in the Great Plains, starting with this comet cloud across Nebraska and trailing south. You can see that very distinct difference, very rich tropical air out ahead of that dry line, hazy look, high theta E values, and high dew points. And on the other side, continental air, the dry slot, comprised of air masses moving in from the southwest and in northwestern Mexico as well. And of course, we've got the wraparound on the other side, cool air filtering back in behind and producing kind of a cold rain up there in the high plains. We're going to cover all that shortly, but let's take a look at the climate statistics. The major indices very close to neutral. The Arctic oscillation a little bit positive, indicating kind of a fast flow around the North Pole. And of course, we're seeing a slow shift into El Nino, and we're in phase 6 of the Madden-Julian oscillation. What does that mean? A lot of warm weather. Dry in Southern California, warm in the Southern Rockies to Oklahoma and Texas, even out into the Midwest and Appalachian regions. Warm weather. So this is what I'm talking about with the slow internet speeds, only getting about half a gigabyte up. So we're going to have to make this program less than 10 minutes. Otherwise, we're going to be here for 2 to 3 hours trying to upload it. Hopefully this will be rectified on Monday with the much faster internet. So across the U.S. this afternoon, a very active pattern. There's that dry line from about Grand Island down to about Stillwater and to Abilene and Sanderson. There's the dry slot, the cool air wrapping around through eastern Colorado and into western Kansas. The storms, of course, are feeding off the better moisture right along the dry line and that little area of pooled moisture and upslope in northern Nebraska. A fresh Pacific air mass being driven southward in the Rockies, driven by this 1020 millibar ridge. So that's all the cool air coming down. You can see temperatures are in the 60s and 70s across the higher elevations of Nevada and Utah. Typically this time of year they are coming up into the 80s. However, much cooler weather today. And in the eastern U.S., lots of outflow boundaries. That disturbance that crossed Texas yesterday has moved up into Tennessee and Kentucky. So a very unsettled pattern out there. And in the northeastern U.S., temperatures are up in the 80s as far north as Boston. A closer look at the northeastern U.S. shows that they're still in northwesterly flow. The satellite showing a mix of cumulus, looks kind of high-based, that is going to be of continental origin, and a lot of cirrus debris coming out of this system way out there in the Great Lakes. And of course, we do have a fresh incursion of cold air coming into the Montreal and Quebec City area, and then further to the west, a warm front. So this whole area out there in the Great Lakes and the Midwest, that's a region of warm advection. So which one is going to win? Warm advection or cold advection? Well, quite frankly, it looks like the cold air may dominate. We go from 555 to 561 decameters, looking at the 1,000 through 500 millibar thickness. Then going into Saturday and Sunday, more cold air coming down. So now we're looking at about 550 to 560, and even more cold air filtering in. So that warm air advection is going to be limited to mostly the Midwest. I did not see much weather news coming out of the southeastern U.S., but numerous storm complexes, and those anvils are being carried to the northwest, which is a little bit unusual. Another storm complex throughout much of southern Georgia, numerous cells. This is very much a summer-like pattern. Now at 500 millibars, the wind flow looks to be out of the west. So we'll take a look at a forecast skew-t in southeastern or southwestern Alabama, and that is showing easterly flow up at Anvil level. This is 200 to 300 millibars and 100 millibars up there. So that's all easterly wind, contrasting with the westerly flow down below 500 millibars. And if you add those together, you get a little bit of shear, about 25 to 30 knots of shear. And that gives us this stretching on the hodograph. It's not much bulk shear, but it's enough to enhance this thunderstorm activity just a little bit. Heading out into the southern plains, the dry line is active. The stronger storms are well up to the north. We're going to cover that shortly. But going down the dry line through Oklahoma, some scraggly cells trying to get going, some around Enid and others down around Norman. And then we find bigger cells out around the Big Country, the area off the Caprock, Snyder, Aspermont, Jayton, Big Spring, and then we get some other big cells down there along the Serrana del Burros into the Sierra Madre Oriental. Yeah, and this is well worth seeing. A lot of thunderstorms popping up with the orographic lift, the infiltration of very moist tropical air, and just numerous cells everywhere. I don't know if there's any severe cells in that stuff, but we don't get a whole lot of severe weather reports out of Mexico, so who knows. Here's a quick look at the Theta E plot. I thought you would find this interesting. This definitely shows where the dry line is. Again, this is the high-resolution rapid refresh, so this is model data, but it does tend to be fairly accurate. Not always, but I think this is pretty close to where it is right now. So the Theta E axis, which is basically the moisture axis, pretty much runs along Interstate 35 from Fort Worth up to Oklahoma City, and you can see the effect of these outflow pools. There it goes. There's those outflow pools all up and down the boundary. So we're going to be looking at kind of a large MCS tonight, maybe not very organized, but that will propagate eastward into the flow of moisture coming up off the Gulf. 70s dew points all the way up towards Fort Worth. And some of those storms could get to Interstate 35 later tonight, maybe even further to the east. And then we are left with kind of a dry, overturned air mass tomorrow. But some of the convection allowing models tomorrow were redeveloping storms later during the day. A multi-day severe weather outbreak. We go back to Wednesday. You can see one little tornado cluster up there in northeastern Colorado. Roger Edwards reported he saw some crazy chasing out there. An unmarked group of 3 tour vans blatantly ran the northbound ad hoc red light on Colorado 71. Really a shame that we're seeing that. A couple more tornadoes out there in northwestern Kansas. And yesterday, more tornadoes. About 14 of them out there in western Kansas, and another cluster down around Oklahoma City. One of the places that was hit, yes, Cole, Oklahoma, which was also hit back on April 19th. Why is this happening? Why do these places keep getting hit over and over? Just like Newcastle and more. I mean, really, what's the probability of that? You do have to wonder if maybe there's some local effects going on. Maybe some topographical interactions. I know that that has been dismissed over the past decades, but it really does make you wonder. And we return to today. It looks like another cell tried to have a go at Cole once again, but couldn't quite hold it together. Other weak storms up the boundary to Oklahoma City, up to Stillwater, and up into Kansas. The stronger stuff in Nebraska. As we record this, a tornado outbreak underway, 25 tornadoes through north central and eastern Nebraska. And that's the picture at this time. Fortunately, Omaha being spared, but down to the south around Falls City, tornado warnings, and looks like one very strong cell out ahead of the line. You can see that curl there in the reflectivity. And the velocity definitely showing a very strong couplet. That is moving north-northeast. Let's get those town names on there. So that's going to be just west of Oakland and heading up to the interstate or the US 77 corridor. US 77, that's the same highway there in Norman. So maybe a little bit of that US 77 magic going on. And this I thought was quite spectacular. This goes back to this morning. And what you're going to see here before I run the full loop, you're going to see that flow out of the east, just north of the surface low. So this is all backed air. In other words, the low levels, the winds are out of this direction. They're coming from southeast to northwest. So that gives us a very curved hodograph as you go up into the mid and upper levels. So that's a very good environment for supercells. So let's go ahead and run the full loop. A very well developed frontal system, classic comet cloud, and you can see those supercells just springing to life out there in eastern Nebraska. And I did not want to forget the rainfall there in Colorado. They had anywhere from 1 to 6 inches of rain across the Front Range and northeastern Colorado. These red areas, that's going to be 5 inches around Denver, which is located right there. Let's try a different color. Okay, so mostly south and east of Denver, the heavier amounts, and a little corridor of maybe 8 inches. Major ponding and local flooding all across Denver. And looks like a lot of areas out to the east also got quite a bit of rain. This is a 7-day precipitation total. Unfortunately, it looks like areas that really need the rain down to the south did not get very much. And there it is, the drought monitor showing the Great Plains in a drought. The heavier rains took place way up here. Down on the panhandles, they came up short. Well, good grief, we're already up to 11 minutes. But anyway, there's shower activity all through the Great Basin and Rockies. Not a whole lot of weather going on elsewhere. Phoenix, Tucson, Las Vegas, and Los Angeles looking clear. And a very nice day in Oregon and Washington. Seeing a lot of green coming out of this satellite animation. And we are running out of time, but yeah, temperatures are coming up pretty good, even as far north as Northwest Territories. Fortunately, the models have backed off on that severe heat wave. We're only looking at 80s and maybe low 90s. So that's definitely some good news, and not as much impact there in Oregon and Washington. Anyway, up to the north, Alaska, looking fairly mild, 40s and 50s. And then up there in the Arctic, some warm weather in the Northwest Territories. See that little warm wedge? And look at that, 84 degrees at Hay River, 82 at Fort Simpson. So it is definitely looking like summer in some parts of the Arctic. So that will do it for this edition of Forecast Lab. Again, we are dealing with a problematic internet, and hopefully we'll have that fully resolved by Monday. And with that, maybe we'll be able to bring back some live streams. That would definitely be nice. And thank you very much to our newest supporter, Thomas Wozencraft. Hope you have a great weekend. We'll see you back here on Monday for the supporters and on Wednesday for everybody else. Have a good one. Bye-bye.